I never thought I would live to see the day when my own family would treat me as if I were nothing more than a guest in their lives. The moment is burned into my memory like a scar. It was a gray Saturday morning when the email came through. A simple subject line that read, "Wedding livestream link." My granddaughter was getting married that very day, and instead of an invitation to sit in the church pews or to hold her hand as I once held her mother's, I was handed a link, as if all my years of love and sacrifice could be reduced to a shaky video feed on a screen. I remember staring at the laptop, my coffee growing cold beside me, the silence in the apartment pressing down so heavy I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. My fingers trembled, not because I was old, but because I couldn't believe how quickly love can be rewritten into inconvenience. They didn't even think I would ask why. They just assumed I would accept it, quietly, the way I have accepted so many small exclusions over the years. The truth is, it wasn't just about that wedding. It was about every dinner where my chair seemed a little farther down the table. Every decision that was made without asking if I wanted to be included. Every time my words were treated as quaint echoes from someone no longer relevant. I felt anger, yes, but more than that, I felt disbelief. Was I really so easy to erase? Did they think my memories, my sacrifices, the very roots of this family, could be ignored like clutter in a room too pretty to show off? I sat there for a long time, staring at that email, my heart swelling with a mix of grief and fire. And yet, even through the sting, a part of me began to harden, because deep down, I knew this moment wasn't an accident. It was the result of many small choices, many tiny red flags I had chosen not to see. And if this family believed I would continue to accept scraps of respect, they were mistaken. That morning, something inside me shifted. I closed the laptop slowly, wiped away the tears that dared to fall, and whispered to myself that this story was not ending here. No, this was only the beginning. The day after that email, I tried to slip back into routine as if nothing had happened. That's the strange thing about heartbreak. It doesn't stop the clock or empty the sink of dishes. Life continues in its ordinary rhythm, even when your chest feels hollow. I brewed my coffee at 07:00 sharp, the way I always do. The smell filled the kitchen, but instead of comfort, it reminded me of mornings when my daughter used to stop by on her way to work. She'd sit across from me at this very table, her hair still damp from a quick shower, her eyes sparkling as she told me about the cases she was handling at the law firm. Now, my phone sat face up beside my cup, screen dark, not a single message lighting it up. I stirred in the cream slowly, listening to the silence that had grown louder with every passing year. Later, I cooked myself a simple breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast with jam. I remember when weekends used to mean a house full of laughter, when my grandchildren's tiny voices echoed in the hallways. Ava once told me my toast was the crispiest in the world, and Noah would sneak bites off my plate, giggling like he'd gotten away with something monumental. But now, meals are quiet affairs. The clinking of my fork is the only sound. In the afternoon, I took a walk around the neighborhood. The air was crisp, leaves tumbling across the pavement, children playing in yards that once felt like extensions of my own home. I used to walk hand in hand with Ava to the park, her little feet skipping to keep pace. Neighbors would smile and call out. 3 generations of Hayes women. Pride used to swell in my chest. But that pride has thinned into something else, into questions I don't want to ask out loud. Why did those walks stop? When did my place in their world shrink into an afterthought? By the time I returned, the house felt colder than it had in the morning. I sat by the window with a book, but my eyes skimmed pages without absorbing a word. My mind wandered back to birthdays when the dining room table overflowed with cake and balloons, and I was always asked to make my famous lemon pie. This past year, that request never came. They had ordered something from a bakery instead. A small detail, easy to overlook unless you realize that small details stitch together into a pattern. That night, lying in bed, I finally admitted what I had been avoiding. This wasn't one isolated wound. It was years of being quietly moved to the edges, years of being invited less, asked less, needed less. I had not been cut out suddenly, I had been slowly erased. And in that stillness, I whispered the truth I had been too afraid to face somewhere along the way. I had become optional. Looking back now, I can see exactly where the line was crossed. At the time, though, I convinced myself it was nothing. That's how it always starts, little requests wrapped in sweet words, framed as just in case or only for emergencies. It was about a year ago when Brooke first approached me with the idea. Ethan was working long hours, she said, and sometimes bills slipped through the cracks. Wouldn't it be easier if she had access to my emergency savings account, just in case something urgent came up while Ethan was tied up in court? I remember the way she spoke, her tone carefully measured, her eyes soft. She made it sound like an act of practicality, even kindness, a way to reduce stress for my son. I hesitated. Of course. That account wasn't just any money. It was $50,000 I had been setting aside for decades, part of it for emergencies, part of it for the grandchildren's future. But when you're a mother, and your son is your whole world, you want to believe that extending trust will make life easier for him. I told myself it was fine. I told myself Brooke was family. At first, it really was harmless. A few charges here and there, groceries, school supplies, even a utility bill. Nothing that raised my suspicions. In fact, I felt almost relieved, as if I had done the right thing by making their lives easier. But then the numbers began to climb. A new set of designer handbags. A spa retreat that lasted a weekend. Charges from restaurants Ethan never mentioned visiting. I remember sitting at the kitchen table late one night, squinting at the online statements. One charge stood out $1,000 at a luxury resort. I told myself maybe Ethan had planned something special for their anniversary. I wanted to believe it so badly that I ignored the gnawing in my gut. That's the thing about love, it can blind you. Not just to what's happening, but to what's already plain in front of your eyes. The spending didn't stop there. $2,000 for a wellness package, another $3,000 at a jewelry store. Slowly, the account I had nurtured like a garden was being drained, flower by flower, until bare dirt remained. And still, I said nothing. I rationalized every transaction, ashamed of my own doubts. I didn't want to be the suspicious mother-in-law, the one who looked for shadows where none existed. But the truth was undeniable. Each time I logged in, more money was gone. More of what I had worked for, saved for, sacrificed for, vanished into someone else's pockets. And when I thought about it clearly, I realized Ethan hadn't mentioned a single one of those purchases. He didn't know. That was the moment my shame hardened into anger. I had not been helping my son. I had been funding Brooke's indulgence. What I had thought was trust had been turned into leverage, and I knew then, with a clarity that burned, this wasn't about family help anymore. It was exploitation. It was a Saturday evening when the invitation came not from Ethan, but from Brooke. A family dinner at their house, she said. Just something small. I told myself it would be a chance to feel included again, to be part of the life I had worked so hard to build. I put on my best navy dress, the one I usually save for church, and carried with me a pie still warm from the oven. It was the same lemon pie my grandchildren once begged for every birthday. When I stepped inside their home, I noticed how polished everything looked. The lights glowed soft and golden. The dining table stretched with fine china I had never seen before. I heard laughter from the kitchen, but when I walked in, it quieted for just a second too long. Brooke's smile was quick, practiced, and Ethan kissed my cheek absent-mindedly, already turning away to refill someone else's glass. I placed the pie on the counter, hoping it would be a sweet gesture, but Brooke slid it aside with barely a glance. "We've already got dessert," she said breezily, pointing to a box from some upscale bakery. My pie sat cooling in the corner. Forgotten. As we sat down to dinner, I tried to keep conversation light. I asked Ava about school, Noah about soccer, but Brooke answered for them before they could speak, steering their attention back toward her. Each time I spoke, it felt as though my words disappeared into the air, acknowledged with polite nods, and then discarded. The moment that broke me came midway through the meal. Someone complimented the roasted lamb, and Brooke laughed, tossing her hair back. "Well, you know Ethan and I could never eat at Mom's house anymore," she said. "She still thinks boiled chicken is gourmet." Laughter rippled around the table. Ethan didn't defend me. He didn't even look my way. I felt my chest tighten, the fork heavy in my trembling hand. Heat crept up my neck, but I forced myself to keep chewing, keep smiling, as if the sting of her words hadn't pierced straight through me. I told myself not to cause a scene, not to ruin their evening, not to give anyone more reason to dismiss me. But inside, humiliation burned hotter than anything I had felt in years. I glanced at my pie, still untouched on the counter, and it struck me then I had brought a piece of myself into that house, a symbol of love and history, and it had been pushed aside, unwanted, just like me. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, the clinking of glasses, the low hum of conversations I was no longer part of, Brooke's voice filling every silence. I sat there, small and shrinking, until it was time to leave. When I finally stepped out into the cool night air, the truth was no longer something I could ignore. Standing on the porch of the house I once thought of as my second home, I understood with painful clarity. I had become an outsider in my own son's home. The night after that dinner, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying every moment, the laughter at my expense, the untouched pie, the silence of my son as his wife mocked me in front of everyone. The humiliation still burned, but beneath the pain, something else began to take shape. It wasn't anger, not anymore. It was resolve. By morning, I had made a decision. If they thought I was too weak, too blind, too dependent to notice what was happening, they were wrong. I had been quiet for too long, and now it was time to take stock of what I still had and to protect it. I pulled down the old metal lockbox I keep tucked away in my closet, the one I hadn't opened in years. Inside were folders neatly labeled savings, investments, insurance, the will I had updated a decade ago. My hands didn't shake as I spread the papers across the dining room table. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt steady. I started with the bank statements. The charges were all there in black and white: Brooke's spa trips, her handbags, the money siphoned away from what was meant to be Ethan's safety net. Page after page, line after line. Proof stared back at me. What once filled me with shame now filled me with clarity. Next, I reviewed the will. I had written it back when Ethan and Brooke first married, believing she would care for him and the children no matter what. Seeing her name listed beside his as beneficiary turned my stomach. I realized then that I had left too much power in the wrong hands. I pulled out a notepad and began making a list. People I trusted, my lawyer, Mr. Randall, who had guided me through the estate planning years ago, my oldest friend, Caroline, who knew me better than anyone and had always stood by me, and, of course, the grandchildren, my reason for everything. As I worked, I thought about the years of sacrifices, the nights I stayed up sewing Ethan's school costumes, the overtime hours I worked so he could go to college without debt, the countless meals, the endless support. All of it had been dismissed as if it meant nothing. But those sacrifices had built something: real stability, savings, protection, and that was still mine to guard. By the time the sun set, the dining room table looked like a war map, documents arranged, notes scribbled, accounts flagged. I felt no rage, no tears, just a deep, quiet strength rising in me. They thought I was powerless. They thought age had dulled my instincts, that love had blinded me forever. But they had mistaken my silence for weakness. And soon, they were going to learn the truth. They had underestimated me, and they were about to find out. The day of the confrontation began quietly, almost deceptively so. I woke early, poured my coffee at 07:15 and checked the accounts one final time. My suspicions were confirmed: another attempt to withdraw funds, this time for nearly $4,000, blocked instantly because I had already frozen access. The paper trail was airtight. By noon, I was sitting in my lawyer's office, folder in hand. Mr. Randall listened as I laid out every charge, every transfer, every violation. He didn't look surprised, only disappointed. "You've done the right thing," he said, sliding the folder back to me. "Now let's make sure she can't touch another dollar." Together, we filed the documents that would lock down my estate, redirect accounts into my name only, and remove Brooke entirely as a beneficiary. That evening, I was summoned for another family dinner. Brooke must have realized something was wrong, because her message carried an edge of urgency. I decided to go. My hands no longer shook when I dressed. My heart didn't race when I walked up the steps to their home. This time, I wasn't walking in as the humiliated outsider. I was walking in as someone who knew the truth. The table was set like before, laughter filling the air. Brooke greeted me with a smile too wide, her eyes darting to Ethan and back again. As I sat down, I felt the weight of the folder in my bag, proof of everything I had discovered. Midway through the meal, she finally brought it up. "There seems to be some sort of mistake with the accounts," she said lightly, though her voice was taut. "Cards are being declined. Transactions aren't going through." She laughed as if it were nothing, but I could see the tightness in her jaw. I let the silence hang before I answered. My voice was calm, steady. "That's because I closed every door you thought you could sneak through." The room fell quiet. Ethan looked between us, confusion etched on his face. Brooke's fork clattered against her plate. She stammered something about helping the family, but I didn't let her finish. You weren't helping? You were stealing, I said, sliding the printed statements across the table. Vacations? Handbags? Spa retreats? Do you really want me to read out the totals in front of everyone? Her face went pale. Ethan picked up the pages, his eyes widening as he scanned the numbers. And then, the twist I had feared but half expected came tumbling out. Brooke blurted, "You don't understand, Chase needed that money. He promised he would pay it back." The name hit the air like a bomb. Chase, Ethan's so-called fitness trainer. I had suspected an affair, but this was more than that. Brooke wasn't just betraying my son emotionally. She had been funneling family money to another man, supporting his lifestyle while Ethan worked himself to exhaustion. Ethan dropped the papers as if they had burned him. His face, once confused, hardened into something I hadn't seen since he was a boy standing up to bullies. Brooke tried to backpedal, mumbling excuses about helping a friend, but it was too late. The truth was out. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My strength came from calm clarity. I have already spoken to my lawyer. Every cent is documented. Every account is protected. You will not steal another dollar from this family. Brooke's mask cracked completely, then tears, rage, desperate denial. She stormed from the table, slamming a door upstairs. Ethan sat frozen, his children staring wide-eyed from the corner. I reached across the table, placed my hand over his, and said softly, "It's over now. She can't hurt us anymore." And in that moment, as Brooke's world unraveled upstairs, I felt my dignity return. Not because I had shouted, not because I had demanded respect, but because I had taken back what was mine. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the outsider. I was the protector. In the weeks that followed, the house grew quieter. There were no more urgent calls about bills, no sudden withdrawals from accounts, no frantic messages demanding attention. Instead, there was a kind of calm that I hadn't felt in years, a calm born from knowing the truth had finally come to light. Ethan and I began to talk again. Really talk. The way we used to when he was young. At first, our conversations were heavy with disbelief and sorrow. He carried guilt for not seeing what was right in front of him, and I carried regret for staying silent so long. But slowly, those conversations softened. We laughed again. We remembered who we were to each other before Brooke's shadow stretched between us. The grandchildren came over more often, filling my kitchen with the kind of noise I had missed so deeply. Ava leaned over the counter as I taught her the secret to that lemon pie, and Noah grinned when he burned the edges of the toast, insisting it was crispy on purpose. Their presence reminded me why I had fought so hard, not for money, not for pride, but for love, for family. I would be lying if I said the pain disappeared overnight. Betrayal leaves scars. There are still nights I lie awake, wondering how long Brooke had been planning, how many times I had brushed off signs that should have warned me. But I no longer carry that shame like a weight. Instead, I carry it as a lesson. Because what I've learned is this: silence is not the same as peace. Sometimes, protecting your dignity means speaking when your voice shakes. Sometimes, loving your family means drawing a line, even when it breaks your heart to do so. I am not the same woman who sat humiliated at that dinner table. I am stronger now, not because of what was taken from me, but because of what I refused to let go of: my self-respect, my love for my son, my devotion to my grandchildren. Those are the things that cannot be stolen. So, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been pushed aside or treated as less, I want you to hear this. You are not powerless. You are not optional. You are worthy of respect, and you have every right to protect what matters most. Thank you for listening to my story. If it spoke to you, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe because your voice matters here. And together, we remind each other that dignity is never negotiable.